how did you know that you were on the right path, and how could you manage? Was there conflict between, you know, your theological knowledge versus the Indian philosophy and this new train of thought?
I think my father, you know, he was very able to make his children feel confident in themselves.
Mm.
He gave us a lot of confidence and the ability to trust our instincts. So if we felt something was good, then he would allow us to pursue that interest. He didn't inhibit us or try to stop us. And I think that was very valuable because you can imagine this is a very new area, certainly in Melbourne. Australia is very different from Europe. And a long time ago now, of course, when all this interest developed, and people didn't know about Kashmir Shaivism or Indian thought or even much about other religions. So the idea of a priest being involved with that was a bit sort of incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't sort of negative in the sense of fighting me, but they didn't understand, they didn't relate to it at all. And they felt they couldn't really discuss it. So I might mention the fact, but conversations went no further because there was nothing to talk about.
Mm.
And but I had the confidence then to continue. And also, I'd been well trained during my Jesuit years to discern the spirits, to know when to be guided by good spirits, as the phrase goes, that's the language they use, or to be warned off from negative emotions. So what brings joy and peace and an enthusiasm which is controlled, not sort of out of space enthusiasm, but a deep enthusiasm. This is something that is a good sign that a person should follow this. In fact, one of the rules that St. Ignatius gives is that if a person finds fruit somewhere, wherever it might be, they should stay there. They should not abandon it.
Mm.
So they continue on in that path if it's a useful path for them. So this was a useful path for me. So I continued, but of course I had the interest to think about these things. It's a bit my way of, my head is that way. I like to understand things and to make things reasonable and defensible. So I sort of thought through these things and of course meditated and prayed, and meditation was a great support because in meditation one comes to one's truth in meditation.
Here, that brings me to my next question. So when you meditate, like, how do you meditate? There's so many different ways of meditation. What is, I mean, like you said, you're meditating since 60 years now. So where are you now, like with your meditation? How is your ritual?
Well, of course, I was trained to meditate in what is called the method of St. Ignatius of Loyola, which is very discursive. You think, you start thinking, you consider, you reflect, you ponder on certain topics, and this leads to eventually to contemplation and stillness. So it starts off with a lot of reflection, but ends up in contemplation. But as I went on and on and on in my experience of meditation, I find myself less inclined to reflect and to ponder on things and to spend much more time in silence and in stillness. Mm. And so my method of meditation is to abide in stillness, to be very still. So to be free of all the turmoil of the mind, the turmoil of conflicting emotions, to go deeper than all the turmoil or the thoughts or the interests or the reflections, to go deep into silence. And in the silence, wonderful things emerge. To use that phrase from the English poet T.S. Eliot, in the stillness is the dancing. Mm-hmm. So when a person comes to great stillness, there's in fact a dancing starts to occur. So there's this rising up of all sorts of wonderful things and experiences, and dancing is the good word to use. So it is this joy when a person You see sometimes in people who are very, very joyful, they will dance and they will move around. They'll go round and round like children sometimes. But it's in the stillness. And it's not the stillness of being mute or dumb or stupid. It's the stillness of faith, because faith is the deepest form of knowledge. When a person goes down to the very depths of their being, which is where faith is found, then they find sources of grace and fountains of life spring up from that place. So it is in great stillness then that I move in the early hours of the morning or other times of the day as well. And I have a little meditation hut I go to out in the bush here, and I'll go, the silence there, it's all dark, and especially at this time of the year and cold. And I go there and I'm very still and I move into this silence.
How important is the breath? Like, are you, like, how important is the breath when you're in your stillness? Is it relevant, or is it just like a side product?
Well, I think there are many methods to enter into stillness, and one is to focus upon the breath. And the breath occurs naturally. There's a natural cycle of in and out of the breathing. And then by reflecting on this breath, a person moves into great silence. But then in the silence, another breathing starts to occur. So it's another form of breath that starts to arise now. It is part of this dancing. This fullness of life starts to manifest itself, because breath and life go together. So one moves from the ordinary breath of inhalation, exhalation, into a deeper form of breath, the breath of life itself, and the Spirit of God, because the Holy Spirit, to use the classical language, the word spirit means breath in Latin. And so this it is this breath that one enters into. So by entering into one's own breath, one enters into the divine breath. And then this is a life-giving breath. So one becomes very alive in that context.
Would you say, how much time do you spend in your meditation?
1 hour.
Okay.
1 hour.
And so you do this daily?
Yes. Each morning I do that. I had to do that. It's part of my pattern of life, and that's what I do. And if I don't do it, I feel that I'm not doing it. I feel the lack.
Yeah. And his name is I don't think if I don't know his first name if I pronounce it right. Bede Griffith.
Bede Griffiths, yes.
Oh my God, like what a human soul. I'm so like I just watched a couple of videos, and incredible human being. And so I read that you were in contact with him, or you asked him in your earlier years on the path. How did this happen? Like, how did you get in contact with him?
Well, he's very important for me to discover this branch of Indian thought called Kashmir Shaivism, because, I had no knowledge of all this. I had no knowledge whatsoever. And so I wrote to him, and he recommended that I should get in touch with someone called Thomas Mattis. Mm-hmm. And so I went to, I had a year of study leave from the Archbishop, which was very nice. And I went to spend time with Thomas Mattis in Italy, at the monastery in Italy. And he introduced me to Kashmir Shaivism because he'd done some doctoral studies on Kashmir Shaivism. He was a Benedictine monk living near Florence. And so he put me onto this field of thought. Most of the books were written in French. So I went to Paris and got the books there. And I found that if I read just a phrase or a sentence or a paragraph, even a word, I would find it would evoke all sorts of emotions and thoughts and responses in me. So he was very important to help me discover this branch. I spent time with him in India also, and he came to Melbourne a couple of times as well. Wonderful. So I knew him there.
And he had also one short story when he had a stroke, and he was brain dead for a little bit, and then he was kind of preparing to die, and he said his prayers and he made peace. But then in this surrendering, obviously he came back to life because he shared this his testimony. But in this surrendering and being okay with death itself, he then experienced, and he said it so wonderfully, because he surrendered to the mother. You know, and like when we talk about religion, it's mainly, we talk about the Father and we talk about the Son, the Holy Spirit. Even we, like, I think the Catholic Church through Spiritus Sanctus made him also male, which but he then explained, like, he surrendered to the mother and there was a wave of love and he was overwhelmed by it and he opened up to the feminine. And so this is kind of like my thing, because I see religion is very much dominated by males, by men, and they are the leaders. And yes, there are certain, like in Catholic, you have the nuns, and they can do a little bit something. And in like my Pentecostal church, yeah, they make missionaries, and we can do a little something. But we are never really put in the place of really not like men. But yet here he has this profound experience with the Divine Mother. So where is the Divine Mother?
Well, I think you're very right to bring up this point. And in my opinion, and this is becoming a majority opinion now among Catholic theologians, I'm speaking about Catholic theologians, I know them, but they would more and more agree that the Holy Spirit is to be seen in feminine terms, that the feminine is the best way in which to understand the Holy Spirit, who is, I could go for a long time on this, so I won't get too deep on this, but the whole question of the Spirit, who is elusive, undefinable, impulsive, inspiring, attractive. The Spirit blows like the wind. The Spirit is like fire or like water. These are the images in the Bible for the Spirit. And we can't control fire and water and air. They are things which move of their own accord. And we depend utterly on these elements. And I think there's a need to discover the impact of the Spirit in the church, to understand, to appreciate, to sense how the Spirit in fact does operate in the church powerfully. And although the bishops and priests may seem to have power, it is really the Holy Spirit who is leading things mysteriously, very unobtrusively, but effectively. And so it's a question of what happens and what we think happens. And of course, the Spirit is immensely powerful in the church. And therefore, the feminine is extremely powerful in the church. But we have to start to realize the fact. And I think that's what we have to do now, is to appreciate, in fact, how much both the Spirit and women too, human women, women, how they have an impact on the church. So I think that's something we have to understand.
I couldn't agree more with you. I couldn't agree more, because I really also believe, as that's my own revelation, is the reason why there is so much turmoil and so much. I think sometimes it's not in balance, because we put so much focus on the male aspect and the masculine, and we suppressed the feminine. And I think this is, like, for me, the reason why it kind of lost its power. Jesus, he never made a difference. He had Mary Magdalene. He spoke to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. He never made a difference between. He revealed himself first to Mary Magdalene after his resurrection. So women to him were always very important. And I think, and I don't understand why the church kind of oppressed it. What happened? Even like in the Catholic system, where all of a sudden a priest is not allowed to marry. It's for me, it's against nature. It's against God, because God says we it's good for us to be alone. So what are your thoughts on that? Like how
well, I think yes. So St. Paul somewhere says that the church is based upon the apostles and the prophets. Apostles and prophets, the church is based upon. Mm-hmm. Not just apostles, but apostles and prophets. And I think the prophetic element is profoundly the realm of the women. Mm. I think women there's a profoundly prophetic element in women, in the sense of speaking from the depths of their experience.
And our emotions and our intuition, like it comes natural.
Absolutely. And prophets are always innovative. They're always seeing far into the future. Whereas I think apostles, well, to some extent, have the duty of keeping the boat from falling apart. But there's also the need to have the wind in the sails. So I think both are needed. Both the feminine and the masculine are needed in a well-balanced church. And we are seeing the beginnings, only the beginnings, the very, very first beginnings by Pope Francis of putting women into positions of more significance in the various roles of the church. But I think we mustn't forget, though, that the women do exercise power. Already they exercise power, but it's not observed or acknowledged, perhaps even, and perhaps not even often welcome. But they do, in fact, have an immense impact on the way on the church. Anyway, that's a big topic there. But I think it's extremely important, and I think people need to discover in themselves the feminine side and also the masculine side, of course. So
exactly, and I think really, I really truly believe. I think this is our next step. Not to suppress one or the other, but if we're in balance, I think this is when peace can come to Earth. Because I think when I look at this Earth, and what, I'm not male bashing at all. I appreciate everything man has done, but they were never really very conscious about Earth, about our planet, and the consequences we have now with like global warming and everything. And so, yeah, I think like the balance. I think I hope we come into this age of the balance of the feminine and the masculine. And I wanted to ask you one more thing. You also started a meditation group in Melbourne, right? Like was it not like an interfaith meditation?
Yes. I'm very involved in interfaith here, and also in teaching meditation. I teach meditation at the university, courses on meditation. So, and I live a little interfaith ashram here, little interfaith group here, and I find the interfaith connections very exciting. This diversity is very illuminating, and I don't like to live in a world of clones. I like to live in a world where people are different and different points of view.
But like, how is that? I'm sorry to interrupt. How is that? Again, because we are always in our world of like our own doctrines and our own belief systems, and I think also here, this is like here springs all our conflict, because everybody wants to possess this is the right way, this is the only way. But it's ludicrous, because God is bigger than just one way. And and I was also impressed, because kind of like with this interfaith, what you are doing, you bring it together, and like there's so much we can learn in Judaism, as well as in the Muslim faith, or the Buddhist faith, or the Hindu faith. And when it all comes together, and it seems like you have done it. But what again gave you there the courage to bring it together? Because it's again, I think, unusual to bring it together.
Well, I think every person needs to find their truth. They need to discover who they are spiritually, and to discover what it is that touches them deeply, to discover their own spiritual character, their own spiritual knowledge. What is it that a person really knows? Not just what they've been told, but what have they discovered truly in themselves, which of course is, in my case, is very definitely the Catholic tradition. So I live within the Catholic tradition, which I find, I'm perfectly at ease there. And it's precisely because when a person discovers their truth, then they're able to open up to other truths without fear. A person who's not sure of themselves, has not discovered themselves or what they really think and believe, then they are uneasy about approaching other people, other truths, because they're not secure in themselves. But when a person is secure in themselves, then they can open up and learn from other people and discover more about themselves by learning about the other. So when I think of Muslims and the Muslim teaching on submission to the will of Allah, that makes me think realize more powerfully all sorts of essential aspects of the Christian faith, which weren't perhaps very obvious to me before. So it's not as though I ceased to be Catholic because I find beauty and truth in Islam. And similarly, I don't cease to be Catholic because I find beauty and truth in Hinduism or wherever. So that's the way one goes. And I think we're not trying to convince each other. We're trying to give witness to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So when I meet other people, other religions, I don't try to convince them of anything. I express my thoughts. I say what I think. I say what the church thinks, what Christianity thinks. I don't try to convince them. I just speak what I think. And if they find any value there, that's good. If they don't find any value, that's equally good too. And I think the same applies for them. So that a Muslim, for example, who's perfectly at ease in Islam and is a true Muslim, not just a cultural Muslim, but a true Muslim in knowledge and belief, then they can simply give witness to themselves and speak when necessary, when appropriate, speak their point of view. So I know some absolutely wonderful Muslims here in Melbourne, absolutely wonderful. And so I think, I'd just love to be with them because they are so true.
Very true, very humbled and very sincere with their worship also to God or Allah. And but then tell me why in these past thousands of years, that's what you say, it's very reasonable, it's very logical, it's very normal. But how comes that we on a large scale, we don't get it together, and we always have, like the wars that ruling this world are the wars of religion. So what can we do, or what can be done, or how can peace come? How can we discuss, like what you just said? We can be Christians or Catholics or Muslims or Hindus, but we can do this and respect and give tolerance to another. What can we do? How can the church, or how can we bring peace here?
I think it's very important for people to meet people. So for Muslims to meet Christians and for Jews to meet Buddhists and to meet people, because that meeting, not just ideas, but to meet people. And so Buddhists meet Muslims. And in that meeting, they discover that the other person is made of flesh and blood too.
Mm-hmm.
The other person loves their children and their families, and they want to work and to be happy and to be peaceful. So I think this, the first step is to meet other people and to meet without fear. And there's no agenda apart from meeting and being together in some easy way. And of course, then I think there must also be education. So a person comes to know what the other person believes, not just what one might think they believe, because often there's errors. Christians can have profound errors about what Muslims think, and vice versa. Muslims can have profound mistakes about what Hindus might think. So it's a question of proper knowledge and education. And then to see, well, there is some value there. There's some beauty in that other faith. Sometimes the colorful customs and practices and images and can become a bit overwhelming. But once one goes beyond perhaps the mere appearances, one can find that there is something profoundly valuable there. So, because, for example, the Hindu customs can be very bit bewildering for a Westerner because we're not used to that colorfulness. But once we understand what they're doing, then, it is just beautiful. So I love to go to India. I love the Indians. They're just wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite at ease going to the temples, which is very, very active, and goodness me. The symbolic richness of an Indian temple is mind-boggling.
Yes.
But it is at the same time so attractive.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe also like now in our time with like technology, and look, like you are in Melbourne, I'm in Berlin, and we can talk right now, we can see each other. So maybe like in our time, maybe now is the time, God is speaking about, where we can really like interact with everybody, and maybe then it becomes clear that in truth, we are really truly all one, and there is no difference. And there's only one God, and we can be in peace with each other.
Yes, I think there's tremendous advantage because we can communicate around the world now so easily, and conferences can take place so easily. And I'm thinking of writing a paper for a conference in Lahore in October. And so I'll take part in that conference in Pakistan in 3 months' time, give a paper there. And I'm sitting here quietly in Melbourne, and hundreds of people will attend, so I can speak to an audience that I never had before, could never have before. Yeah. And so it's these conferences, but not just conferences, all sorts of meetings of people and cooperation. It is wonderful with what we can do now.
Yeah, I'm also very optimistic, and I really think we're coming to the end now for our first session, but I have a feeling I would like to do a part 2 with you, because you have so much knowledge, and there's still so much more that I want to talk to, even also hear this book, because this is how I found you, Jesus, the Mantra of God, because on my journey, my intuition that thought like being in India and meditating and being a Christian though, and trying to bring it all together. So maybe we can do, if you have time and if you give me your time, we can do a part 2, maybe in the coming weeks. And then we go more in depth in this book, Jesus, the Mantra of God, because that's also incredibly intriguing. And you talk about the chakras, but also from a point of view of, a Christian point of view. And I love to continue our conversation.
I'd be very pleased to. Very pleased to.
And thank you very much.
Let me know. Good. Okay, Heike.
Just wonderful talking to you. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.